May the words of my mouth and the meditation of each one of our hearts be always acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. 244 years ago, on July 4th, 1776, Christ Church in Philadelphia had an historic decision to make. Their new rector was the chaplain to the First Continental Congress, and the group of founding fathers who had just 2 days earlier voted with no small amount of fear and trembling to, quote, dissolve the connection with the king, with Great Britain, in what you and I now know as the Declaration of Independence. Now, Christ Church, that church owed its existence to the very government in England. And the rector, as all priests in the Church of England did, had taken oaths in his ordination to, quote, bear faith and true allegiance to the King's Highness, and to assist and to defend all his jurisdictions. But here was the impending decision, theological, practical, and political, not just for the rector, but for the whole parish. Sunday was coming up, and they had a decision to make, whether or not they would pray for the king and the royal family, because it was dictated that it would be so in the prayers included in the English prayer book. And so on that 4th of July, 1776, the rector and the vestry, they gathered, and they made the decision not to say the prayers for the king and the royal family, or as the minutes from that meeting show, for the peace and well-being of the church, to omit the said petition for the king. And so to this very day, you can go to Christ Church in Philadelphia, and you can see the old prayer book where that prayer has an ink line literally crossing out those prayers for the king. In fact, you can even go there and look at the vestry minutes. Well, several years later, 1787 and 1789 to be precise, the Constitution for the new United States of America and the Constitution for the new Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States, they were written in the very same place in Philadelphia, really at about the same time, with many of the same people. Both our nation's and our church's constitution, they articulate the language and the ideals of freedom and justice. Now, it may surprise you, but Independence Day is actually a feast day in the Episcopal Church's calendar of feasts and fasts. Of all the national holidays, only 2 are included in the Book of Common Prayer: Thanksgiving and Independence Day. And so to include the 4th of July, to include Independence Day in the church's calendar, I think what it does, it stands as a reminder of the complexity about whether faithfulness to God meant loyalty to the king or to something else. It's a reminder of the complicated intertwining of religion and politics in our very founding, both as a nation and a church. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God, wrote Thomas Jefferson, with a picture of Moses leading the Israelites out of Israel on the draft of an American seal. It's a reminder of the conflict in our very own founding. We proclaimed that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And yet we held that people with darker skin were only 3/5 of a person. Native peoples and women were not included in full citizenship and didn't even have the right to vote for many years. And so I think to remember Independence Day as a feast of the church, it's to remind us that God's not done with us yet. God's not done with our country. God's not done with the world in setting all people free. America is not yet fully realized in all of its beauty and glory. It's still full of broken people and places. And the cracks that divide race from race, rich from poor, they seem to grow ever wider. And we watch in fear as despair and hatred, they take root in those cracks. Yet our faith It reminds us that broken places can also be places where the fullness of love is revealed. For it's in the broken body of the crucified Christ that we see that God so loved the world that he gave us his Son. Yeah, America's problems seem overwhelming and frightening. We don't know how we as individuals or voters or nonprofit agencies or protesters can even begin to make a difference. Yet communion, it reminds us as we pass the bread from hand to hand and the cup from mouth to mouth, that God has given us two invaluable gifts, each other and God's own love for us embodied in Christ. And with each other and with God's love, all things are possible. And during this time, when we still are not receiving the Eucharist, we still can receive those gifts. And during this time, when we celebrate the nation's independence in the midst of pandemic and turmoil, we still offer those two invaluable gifts to the world. The gift of ourselves and the love of God to this nation that is yet to be perfected, so that we, with God's help, can help to repair all those broken places, systems, and people. Happy Independence Day. Amen.